You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Lauren and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Jonesy and welcome to another special edition of Jedi Novel Archive, where we're going to be live with the one and only amazing Ms. Lauren Stringer. How you doing tonight, Lauren?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this short story, which I selfishly chose because I wanted to read more Adam Christopher. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Adam Christopher, of course, we had a lovely opportunity to interview him a couple years ago when Shadow of the Sith came out on our Patreon feed, and it was just such a cool dude. And you talk about a guy who can write Star Wars and really get into the meat of the characters, even with these short stories. It's pretty amazing what talented authors could do, especially when they get the content. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. The new book coming out, Master of Evil, I feel like it's probably just going to be even better than Shadow of the Sith. So, I mean, maybe I've got my hopes a little high, but I think they're reasonably high.
He has set that standard now, so he's got a lot to accomplish to be able to do it. But I'm with you that it's interesting. It's like really familiar territory with Vader, but also there's just so much meat on the bone still that we could get more into, and it's just going to be interesting to see how creative they go about doing that, what the approach is going to be for it.
Totally.
Yeah. So, hey, before we get started, a quick shout out to all of our Patreon members, cantinacast.com/Patreon. If you are curious about it, and we want to send a special thanks out to our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Danny, Dante, Daz. I've got a Brad, Phelan, Jackson, Jacob, Josh, Mike, Reader Reborn, Sharkman, Dan, and Uncle Leon. I shook the names up all over the place this week, so it's hard for me to say it. It might be sound a little attitude there for y'all as well. And then, of course, a super shout out, there we go, to our Deluzers Grandeur members. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob, our top tier, of course. So, again, thanks to all of our Patreon members at all tiers, but especially those folks as well. cantinacast.com/Patreon. Hey, quick programming notes here is on Wednesday, July 9th. Albert will be back and for episode 613, and we're going to continue our Andor character spotlights. And we're going to be focusing on the one and only Mon Mothma. So this is going to be a pretty exciting episode. People have been asking for it. Pretty exciting stuff there too. So 9 p.m. Central on Wednesday. And if you want to come out to the live stream, Lauren, how do they do that?
We are on YouTube, cantinacast.com/YouTube.
Yeah.
That was a pop quiz.
It was. Yeah, no, I'm out of sorts too. This is odd. We're both out of sequence here. Who's
we don't
doing
have
what?
a babysitter right now.
That's right. Dad's away again. Yeah. So yeah, cantinacast.com/YouTube. Thanks for coming out. If anybody joins in the live stream, we'd love for you to come out and then say hello, put your name up on screen, and of course, give you a special shout out there and say hello to. And of course, Lauren, with Jedi Novel Archive, what all have you had on the channel lately?
So I just recently posted my High Republic video for Trials of the Jedi, which was the final adult novel of the High Republic. So that's up. Right now, I am currently reading Thrawn Alliances just for fun, just because I want to read that book. So a video for that is going to be coming shortly. And then we do also have a Bad Batch novel coming up, which is called Sanctuary. So my pre-release kind of sneak peek is going to be coming out at the end of the month on July 22nd. And then the book is going to be published on August 5th. So that's when my full review for that is going to be coming out.
I'm actually kind of excited about the Bad Batch book. I mean, it sounds like it's just going to be another episode of the Bad Batch, but I got to be honest, going back with the full crew and everything, I think it's just going to be fun. I think that's mostly what I'm looking forward to, is just a fun book.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Bad Batch, I mean, those characters are like so beloved, so why not spend some more time with them? Like, that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Exactly. Just like when we have you on the show, we just want to spend more time with you, Lauren. So, hey, why don't we get into it? So again, like Lauren said, we have The Witness by Adam Christopher, and this was part of the From a Certain Point of View, The Empire Strikes Back collection of short stories. It's such a mouthful to say all of that. And the tease line for the book was, in honor of the 40th anniversary, 40 storytellers recreate an iconic scene from The Empire Strikes Back through the eyes of a supporting character, from heroes and villains to droids and creatures. This also had an audiobook companion as well, which was read by Emily Wu Zeller, who you might be familiar with, who read the Dr. Aphra audio drama and was part of that. So she did an amazing job there too. But Lauren, before we get into initial impressions, why don't you kind of give us an overall summary and overview of the Witness story altogether?
Yes. Okay. So in the story, we're following a stormtrooper character named Dina. And when we start off, she already is having mixed feelings about the Empire versus the Rebellion and like what side that she's on. But she's a stormtrooper because, of course, at the time when she joined, seemed like a good idea. She used to believe in the Empire. And the thing that used to kind of appeal to her about it is that sense of order that they are promoting. She's kind of like, what's wrong with having order in the galaxy? But as a stormtrooper, she sees a lot of bad stuff going down. Like, for example, she's lost a lot of her stormtrooper friends. When Alderaan is destroyed, that really impacts her and really deeply disturbs her. And so she eventually gets to the point where she's like, I wish I could quit. But she kind of hasn't really gotten the courage to do it yet. And what happens is she gets paired up with this other stormtrooper on missions pretty often, where she is assigned to escort Vader to various places. And she really hates this guy. And he goes by FS451, which is his stormtrooper name, but he doesn't even use like his actual name. And
this guy is super special. We're going to talk a lot about him tonight.
Yeah, he's horrible. He's like obsessed with the Empire. Like, he's so obsessed with the Empire that it kind of gives her the creeps. And so this is just like one more example to quit, is like having to be around this guy. But she can't really bring herself to actually do it because she's questioning, like, okay, so if I quit and like desert, then what? Like, what's actually going to be out there for me? And it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of options. And so she's kind of, keeps going back and forth about this. And the last straw ends up being when she witnesses Han getting frozen in carbonite. And that's just like one more deeply disturbing thing that's just like such a waste. And so she deserts on Cloud City, and she's trying to sneak out, keep hidden from the stormtroopers and all that, or the ones that she assumes are probably looking for her. But she ends up in the lower levels of the city and ends up in that control room where Vader and Luke have that confrontation. And she sees a lot of it go down, not the whole thing, but kind of bits and pieces. She even hears parts of their conversation where Vader is revealing that he is Luke's father, but she can't really hear all of it. She can just tell that something important is happening, but she doesn't really understand the context of it. And after that is over and they go their separate ways, she ends up getting away. And now she's trying to evacuate Cloud City with the rest of the masses of people that are trying to leave. And she's ditched her armor by this point, so she's just trying to blend in. And what she ends up doing is actually volunteering to help with the evacuation efforts and help people get off of Cloud City. So she ends up kind of joining the good guys in the end.
Right. And what's interesting about the story is that while it's not really, if you take a step back and kind of read it and listen to it it was like a 48-minute audiobook. I'm not sure how many pages this was. It was a decently long story, though. But we take a step back and look, you're like, okay, really not a lot happened, right? Because it's all within the context of everything from Han and Carbonite to Luke, jumping off the weather vane. But there's a lot of, like, especially coming off of Andor and some of the other books that we've read over the course of the years, like it's got this fresh component to it of what it means to be in the Empire. And also, I think the hopelessness of, like, how do you get out of the Empire? Like, what do you do? Like, we saw this with, and maybe we'll just kind of start here with, how do we, how must someone get out of the Empire in the first place? We saw Luke did, of course, in Andor. We saw him, kind of having a nervous breakdown, right? They're slaughtering these people. He's on his ship. He's just kind of finding ways to escape. And then he, of course, bumps into Clea, or who would become Clea. And he just kind of makes this decision in maybe opportune or just kind of soldier of fortune type of atmosphere here. And we see a little bit of the same with Dina, right? Of course, there's an event that happens. We'll talk about that here shortly. But when she actually finally makes the commitment to be able to do it, it's just kind of take one chance as you go. It's the Rogue One mentality of sorts with some of this, right?
Yeah, definitely. And also, I wanted to add too that this reminded me a lot of Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, the YA novel,
Mhm.
where, I mean, Dina doesn't have another person that she cares about that she's going back and forth with, like happens in Lost Stars, but very similar situation where in Lost Stars, the main character, she was all about the Empire at the beginning and then just started seeing messed up stuff. And even though, I mean, I don't want to spoil Lost Stars, but even though her story takes a different path than Dina's does, she does start to kind of question, like, what is it that I'm involved with here?
Right. Yeah, and I think, and you had in the notes here, Mask of Fear by Alexander Freed, of course, which we've raved about over the last couple of months here. But I think, yeah, similar tones there too of like, what does it mean to accept the Empire and adopt what it means to be a part of the Empire, but also how do you rebel against it? And is it even a fruitless endeavor or a fruitful endeavor to be able to do? Because usually there's just so much risk with it. And I think Dina talks about this too. Like, what would I even be able to do? Like, she tries to, at the end of the short story, she has an opportunity to take a kill shot with Vader. Of course, it was all doomed to fail because the weapon wasn't active anywhere. The weapon was jammed. But, at the same time, it's like, what are you going to do with that? And she chastises herself afterwards. But you kind of feel that tension, though, of like, I'm just stuck in this beast that I can't seem to do anything with. And you kind of feel that hopelessness creep in throughout the story of like, how was she going to be able to actually achieve, leaving, even though she really had to have a moment, kind of I don't know what the right word is, but you have that singular moment where you're like, okay, I've seen enough, like it's over. And for her, that was the destruction of Alderaan, and maybe more specifically, FS 451's like feelings and expression of his, I don't know, gleeful satisfaction with the destruction of the planet.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because the part was, even though the part with Vader, she's like, oh, that was, futile. I don't know why I tried that. It kind of takes a moment of rage for her to actually act.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like that moment with Vader, when she kind of like lost control and stopped caring for just a second about like what's going to happen to me if I do this, even though the weapon was jammed, nothing was going to happen. But it's kind of like that same kind of mentality is what actually finally got her to desert. It took like a crazy opportunity where just for a second she had to stop thinking about what are the consequences going to be, just like she did with Vader later on in the story. And I mean, thankfully, none of those consequences really catch up to her, at least in this story. But
right.
It kind of takes like something has to be right in front of her to actually prompt her to act.
And we see this a bit in Rogue One, or in Andor, I think, too, right? We see these characters who are in these moments of action. I mean, granted, some of them have a little bit more experience, but we kind of see Cassian's journey throughout it as well, of similar position sometimes. Until he's in the moment where he has to act, he's, especially in season 1, he's just not committed, right? He doesn't necessarily maybe want to do it, or it's not his fight. I mean, Dina's coming from a different perspective, of course, but you do sense a little bit of that. Like, there is no action oriented until something kind of pushes her. And so that's really nice to see at the very end when she does kind of make her own decisions. She sees an opportunity and she puts herself out there in a certain way. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's nice that she kind of finally is the one to initiate that decision for herself, rather than kind of like, to your point, waiting for things to happen and forcing her to kind of go down a path that maybe she didn't necessarily choose. Although she's choosing these paths, make no mistake, but it's nice that she finally has that moment of clarity where she feels like she actually has a choice in the matter, and then it's not pre-decided for her in some way.
Yeah, and it almost seems like that moment of clarity is also dependent on, it has to be something so extreme that she has to stop caring about the consequences for at least a moment.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting aspects of this is she's reflecting on Alderaan's destruction, and she's thinking about, she understands the rebel perspective to an extent, right? And it kind of creates this internal debate, which I thought was really interesting, of, she kind of understands fight against cruelty and tyranny, which I think she's reflecting and seeing that she knows what they've done. She kind of admits that we've done stuff that she's not proud of. But it's also this idea of what is the opposite of order, right? The Empire is always saying we're here for law and order, and everybody else is against that. And they just automatically assume that is chaos. But she takes a step back. And again, from a rebel perspective, it's not about chaos. It's about freedom. So, what does chaos mean in that context? And from whose perspective, I think, does that even, does that change?
Well, yeah. And I mean, like thinking about the destruction of Alderaan, it's like, okay, that's not order. That's like the
Right.
farthest thing from order. You just completely destroyed an entire planet.
That's
So
fear and subjugation. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like this isn't really said word for word, but I do feel like the whole sense of order, part of the reason it stops appealing to her is because it's like, okay, well, first of all, the Empire isn't even delivering on this order that they promised. Like, if you look at any of these systems that they're occupying, there's no order there. I mean,
Right.
in Cloud City, when everybody's leaving, it's like a mass hysteria of everybody trying to get away from the Empire. That's not order. So it's like, okay, what is all this even for then? If you're saying there's going to be order, there's not even actually order. You're just stepping on people, really.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I landed too, towards your last comment there of, it's the, like, what do you do to maintain order? What's your intent? Like, what's your motivation for it? And for the Empire, she's seen it firsthand because they're the enforcers, right? They're the faceless weapon of the Empire that goes and enforces all these things as a stormtrooper. And, it's that when you commit atrocities in that way, and again, the Luthen example is very fresh on our mind from the series, but when you have these bodies, that are just there to basically crush anything that resembles an uprising, even if it's just tension, they're there and they have a presence, and maintaining order is basically kind of creating a slave-like mentality, to the general populace, that they're always ready for an inspection. They're always have to do everything exactly as is. And then we've seen numerous examples of this where, the Empire will create things just to, make sure it fits whatever scenario they're having to cover up that maybe they screwed up in the meantime.
Yeah. So it's really just, even when it appears to be order, it's covering something up, or it's just a total facade. It's not actually lasting.
Right. But the one thing that is lasting, Lauren, is FS 451, and his, as Dina puts it, he's a true believer, but she says that really is probably the wrong term for it. It's probably more of a fanatic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about FS 451 and kind of his piece of this story and some of the things that he's done?
Yeah, well, his love for the Empire is certainly lasting, as you said, because it kind of seems like this guy has no deal breakers. It's crazy.
That is crazy, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's horrible. No empathy for anybody or anything. He is obsessed with the Empire. He has his stormtrooper name tattooed on himself.
Yeah,
which he shows off. It's so weird.
Oh yeah, you gotta frame this up though, Lord. This is like a total dude bro. So when he's out of his armor and he's in just fatigues, he will actually rip his shirt down the middle and like have it part, so you could see his number, which he's tattooed right around his collar, just to be able to flash. That's how proud he is of he. No one knows his name either, right? So the other ones all share their real names or whatnot, but FS 451 is just his call sign or just his number, and very proud of it, but total dude bro.
Well, I actually have a question for you about him. So
Sure.
One thing that they say in the story is Dina mentions, or she's reflecting, how he's so dedicated to the Empire, and he's a good stormtrooper, but he doesn't seem to move up in the ranks ever. And
Right.
people are like, why doesn't he move up in the ranks? It seems like he would be something more advanced at this point. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wish Albert was here. He'd probably have a really clever answer for it. Man, I don't, sometimes you just have those people that they do the grunt work really well. And you just know that they just, like, from a capacity standpoint, I'm not trying to bag on anybody, but from a capacity standpoint, you just kind of found your niche and that's what you do well. And there's not a lot of other things that someone would trust you to do. And I think when you have someone who's as really cruel, I think, as that 451 is, and we'll talk about that here in a second, like you kind of see, okay, maybe some of those people start to progress, but they don't have a bigger picture in mind. And I think for him, it's mostly motivation and self-interest that he's, achieving some of these things. And then while it's for the glory of the Empire, he's kind of happy to go out there and carry a blaster and just put people down. And I'm a little curious though, because she had recounted one story where everybody in his in his troop or division or whatever it was basically died, and he was the only one to come back alive. And I thought that was just a really peculiar scenario of, was there something sketchy about what he did? Did that catch your attention at all, or was that something you thought was a little shady too?
See, okay, that's interesting you point that out, because in the moment when I read that, I just took it as, oh, he's just good at fighting or whatever.
Yeah.
But now that you point that out like that, now I'm wondering, did he make some kind of mistake that caused everybody else to die? And because it was his mistake, he just is the lucky one that didn't get subjected to the consequences of his mistake? Like, I don't know. I mean, I could see that.
Or he sacrificed them to survive in some way, which I think knowing the characters, we don't know him super well, but it seems like he's not above doing something like that. Of the rest of them were the shield, and he was able to escape when everyone else died.
Yeah, well, and I will say, so my theory about the question I asked you of why he hasn't moved up, my theory is him with all his gleeful laughing about the atrocities and stuff like that. I almost wonder if his superiors look at him and are like, this guy is a loose cannon. Like,
Yes.
he is getting way too, like, into this stuff that it's kind of weird. So we don't want to make him actually in charge of anything,
Right.
because there's no telling what this guy's going to do.
Yeah, and 451 really wants to be a death trooper, right? I think that's what they had said.
Or it was a death trooper, or another idea that they threw out there was the incinerator stormtroopers.
That's what he really aspired to do, which I think is probably fits him, because he would just burn people alive, which he thought was just the most amazing thing in the world to do.
Which is like absolutely, I mean, we don't need to
pure
say
insanity.
Yeah, we don't need to say how messed up that is, that's his desire.
Yeah, this dude's a little sick in the head. And we see this come to the surface a little bit when they start to talk about the torture of Han Solo. And it was confusing to Dina because she wasn't really sure why they were torturing Han, and Vader never even asked a question, which is just very strange. Of course, we know from stepping back that he was trying to send pain out there so that it would attract Luke, because he would sense it in the Force and all that. But what we kind of learned to find out is that, you know, she and 451 are the two stormtroopers in the room when we see this in the movie, and he is just eating it up. And he is good at what he does. He's a magician with his fingers, or whatever he's doing with torture, of being able to bring Han Solo to an inch of his life, but not leave a single mark on him, but has this glee about it and really can't wait to get back to work, you know, later on. But we start to see that additional sick nature of this character come through.
Yeah, and that's one of those defining moments for her where she's like, this is just such a waste, because we're not even trying to get anything out of this guy. So with Dina, it seems like she's drawing the line at, like, there needs to be at least a purpose to this, which, you know, not saying if that's reasonable or not, but it seems like for her, if there's no purpose, then that's when it is that she finally starts seriously questioning these things. And FS 451 is a perfect example of, there's just a purposelessness to the atrocities that are happening.
Right. Yeah. So Alderaan kind of gets her started. She kind of makes her mind up. But then when she sees this stuff with 451 on Cloud City, it just reaffirms, like, I got to get out, and I got to get out now. This might be my best opportunity to be able, you know, to get out of her, or to be able to get out of the situation, because there's a little bit of chaos going on and what's happening, I think, that we see within the movie context. But I think maybe the next part we could talk to is when she does make this decision, right? She trades blasters with, I think, what her name was, Tiggs, I think.
Tig, yeah.
Yeah, Tig, which was her counterpart on the platform when they were, you know, freezing Han Solo and Carbonite, the one that Chewbacca knocks off of the thing, but her gun jams within that process. And so they swap weapons, and she ends up getting the gun that's got a jammed safety or something like that. So the weapon doesn't work. We kind of talked about this is going to be set up a little bit later on, but in that moment is when she decides to desert. And what I thought was perhaps the most interesting part of this story was just that process of desertion, and that the paranoia that goes with it, right? Of everybody's, anytime she sees a stormtrooper, or she sees a troop coming around a corner, or any kind of division, like, she just automatically assumes they're all coming for her. It's that paranoia, that just impending doom, that, you know, everybody knows who she is, and she's just a spotlight, even though she describes herself and says that, you know, her style isn't necessarily anything completely abnormal from what would be on Cloud City. it's acceptable, be able to blend in that way. But FS451 and her squad definitely know what she looks like. So she's got that in the back of her mind anytime she sees any kind of patrol going around, that she might be the next one to be picked up. But what do you think about that part of the story, though? Just this paranoia aspect and what it means to try to escape, but also not having a plan to escape, and you're in a completely foreign place. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that seemed the paranoia was very believable, especially at the part where when she's first like, okay, I'm gonna desert, and she's in the bathroom and she's ditching her armor, and she's like, I don't know where to put any of this. Like,
Right.
that's something I wouldn't have even thought of, is like you gotta hide the armor somewhere so that way you're not so identifiable. So it's like even down to like small details that you wouldn't really think, such as where am I gonna put my helmet so people don't pick me out of a crowd? She has to think about all these things, and her life is on the line if she forgets even one detail. But so that was very believable about the paranoia, because it seems like you would have to worry about every little thing. But I wonder if her squad mates, which it's explained in the story that she's really close with them,
Right.
I wonder if they would have told on her if they saw her, or if they would have just let her go.
I think they would have raised questions and asked, because maybe tell me if you got a different impression. It doesn't seem like they've talked in these terms within the squad before. Did you get that impression that maybe they have?
I don't think that they have talked about deserting, but the only reason I felt like this was even a remote possibility is because Tig does switch blasters, which they're not supposed to do.
Right.
And basically, like, it explains that if they switch blasters, they could get in trouble. That's like against protocol or whatever. Um, and Dina's like, oh, I'll switch blasters with you since yours isn't working, and I'll get it replaced. And Tig just accepts that.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, Tig is willing to bend the rules a little bit. So maybe if Tig saw Dina walking around without her helmet on, she would be like, okay, I'm just gonna mind my business. I don't know.
It's an interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that, because what would they do? I think I just assumed that if she ran into her squad, she was probably running into 451 as well, which would of course have been a non-conversation starter. He probably would have fired on her. Well, maybe not on the spot, but he definitely would have arrested her or something along those lines, I would think. But
Oh yeah, now that guy would have done everything possible for her to
Right.
get in trouble for sure.
But it would have been an interesting conundrum, though, if the rest of her squad or any part of her squad came across her and she, like, do you think she would have tried to convince? I mean, it sounds like she would have tried to convince them possibly that, hey, we're on the wrong side of this conflict. You saw what happened with Alderaan. Here's this other stuff that's going on. This is just crazy. Like, why are we doing this? Some of the things we've done have just been absolutely awful. I could see that conversation happening, though.
I mean, if there was time for that conversation,
Right.
yes, because I mean, there's no way that Dina's the only person that was disturbed by Alderaan.
Oh, we know there were defections going on all over the place in the Empire. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
I-
Lost Stars talks about that too. That after
Right.
Alderaan, everybody was really like shaken up.
Right. And it seemed like,
So-
I thought maybe that was where the conversation with Tig was going to go, that maybe she'd have a partner in crime that maybe would have died or something along the way. Maybe that's a little too cliche, but I would have thought that she would have had that moment of hesitation of like, well, do I tell Tig? But I think also that it's probably that healthy uncertainty of where everybody's true loyalties truly lie. And you can't really, I mean, the Empire gives them a lot. To give all of that up and not have any kind of plan again just is a difficult one for anybody to assume and probably pick up in the heat of the moment, I think, too, right?
And the stakes are just really high. Like if she
Yeah.
took a chance on talking to Tig about it and Tig was like not about that, then
Right. Then
that's
she's
the
blown
desertion
right
play
away.
moved.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
exactly. Okay. So I think the other part of maybe that part of the story before we get into the Luke and Vader part of the story is she's kind of questioning if normal life even has anything to offer after everything she's done. And we've seen other characters go through these motions too. And maybe talk a little bit about kind of how she's reconciling some of the things she's done that's helping her decision back and forth.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, leading up to the point of her actually deserting, that is really the only thing that's stopping her. I
Right.
mean, she knows that she disagrees with everything, but she can't actually get up the courage to do it because it's like, well, what would I do then? And so even as she's deserting and she's like walking around trying to figure out a way off the planet, the whole time she's kind of like, this is crazy. Like that feeling doesn't really fully leave her until the very end when she's offering to help people get off the planet.
Right.
So it's almost like she kind of needs another purpose. And if she doesn't have another purpose in mind, it's almost kind of like she's having a hard time envisioning what else her life could be. Like there has to be something there to fill the purpose of being a stormtrooper. So that was something that struck me, is that it takes that other purpose for her to fully let go of the past, is the way I took it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And we had talked about this with the Andor various episodes and whatnot, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about Andor a whole lot, but the question kind of comes up with like Vel and Clea, like some of these characters who were really steeped in maybe the really dirty side of the rebellion and then the formation of the rebellion. And once like Clea in particular, maybe at this point, like her purpose is kind of served. What's next, right? Like, what is it that you want to grasp onto? And that uncertainty of you don't even know where you fit until the right situation kind of presents itself and comes around where you're like, hey, I can fill that need or I can do that. And then you finally have something you can grasp onto. But until then, it's very easy to feel lost and kind of go down a darker path as well. So I like that they at least kind of bring that up and then they find a resolution for some of that. I think that's always important. I think some of the over the years of listening to you talk about some of these, that resolution is important for you in a story to be able to have an idea of, okay, we know what the character needs and they at least get a part of it to start heading down the right path.
Yeah, because like, why put us through like the trouble of worrying about this character if
Right.
you know what I mean? If she's got nothing to hope for. Like that kind of thing drives me crazy. So I liked it that we got a little bit of hope at the end of like, no, she's gonna have another purpose, even though she felt like that life had nothing to offer her. She is gonna find that there's things that she can do and be useful for and contribute to.
Right. So let's talk about the big helmeted black elephant in the room of Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker here. And maybe just to back up a little bit, how do you feel about these short stories that kind of revisit the scenes that we know really, really well? And I think, and especially this scene, I think in Empire Strikes Back is one of the most important scenes in the entire movie and really in the entire original trilogy saga, I think, and to an extent. Like, how do you feel about getting a different perspective that inserts another person into what is, in this situation at least, kind of a very intimate exchange between these two characters? Do you like that? Is it kind of dangerous? Or, yeah, I don't know if I would do it all the time, but when it's done well, it can work. Like, what's your take on that just in general?
I kind of interpret these stories as like canon light. So
Yeah.
if there's something that doesn't fit with like my own sort of belief of what the scene should be, I'm fine with just being like, no, that's not what I think, and just moving on. So
Right.
that kind of that mindset, which I've done this before with High Republic too, where someone
Right.
will say something and I'm like, no, I don't accept that. And that mindset helps me not like get overly like upset about if someone else's interpretation of something is different than what I would have thought or
Right.
wanted. So that's kind of how I go into all these short stories too, is I like the spin that people put on it. And if the spin isn't really my thing, then it's just not my thing. But yeah, I do agree that the scene does feel very one-on-one when you're watching the movie. And the thought of a stranger overhearing that conversation is odd to me, especially
Right.
because how did they not notice her like right over there, like within earshot?
Yeah.
So even if she was hiding, I still feel like, I don't know, it seems too easy to notice her in my opinion. But I still liked the interpretation and the spin on it, even if I found it kind of hard to believe.
I think as long as they stay out of the way of the importance of the scene, then these things tend to be okay and they tend to work out all right. And I think, yeah, I want to dive into what you were saying here though, too, of, why, like, another character with as sensitive as maybe not Luke at this point in his Jedi training, but with Vader, it seems like another presence there. Vader would have sensed her at some point. Do you think he did, or was he just like hyper focused on Luke Skywalker to where nothing else really matters? There's beings everywhere on Cloud City. It was just another pinprick of in the Force, so to speak. but not his quarry, and he didn't really feel any threat from them. We could explain some of it away maybe in some of those terms too, I guess.
Yeah, I took that as he was just so focused on Luke and getting to the bottom of this business with Luke. Because, I mean, it is explained in the story that this is like his obsession,
Right.
is finding Luke. So, in which we obviously know from other sources too. So, to me, I just took that as he is just so focused on Luke that he's not thinking about what else is going on. And maybe there are other people in the building or whatever doing other things that he isn't thinking about, and maybe she just kind of faded into the background of all the other activity.
Right. And I think, again, for those maybe that haven't read this, and like you were saying in the summary, she's only able to hear bits and pieces. I think this is where the audiobook kind of helps fill in some of the gaps that you would kind of they're more useful to hear than maybe read on the page. So on the page, they'll use ellipsis, or they'll use gaps in the dialogue to denote that, a big gush of air. So when all of the air is whooshing around them, especially when they go out to the antenna after they blow through the porthole or whatever it is, through the kind of the first confrontation with Luke and Vader, once they get off of the carbonite platform, all of this air movement is going around, so she can't hear it over the gusts of wind. And I think the audiobook helps a little bit with that, because they actually did a pretty good job. Actually, some of the music choices were pretty good too here. And these sound effects kind of help fill in those gaps rather than trying to read them on a page. But for those that are maybe not as familiar with it, you do know that she's not hearing the I am your father part. He says, I am your, and that cuts off there. I probably would have cut off a little bit sooner, so there wasn't any ambiguity there.
Not too convenient.
Right. But there's certain aspects of that speech towards the end that she doesn't hear all of that stuff. So my question, though, is she's kind of where she's in her head, she's like, I've got this information. It seems really important. It is really important. It seems really important. How can I leverage this? Or, I might be able to use this or whatever. But do you think that she really had enough information to do anything with? Or would anybody be like, or they just be like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, there's who would she bring it to? Or how valuable was that information for what she actually captured, which was maybe 60 or 70% of the dialogue, maybe 70-75% of the dialogue, something like that?
I think that she has more valuable information that's actually usable just from being a stormtrooper than from this conversation. I feel like this conversation was just kind of like so vague that if she's like, I saw Vader and this guy and they were in an argument, it's like, okay, like, can you tell us about like where military bases are? That would be more useful.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if she could actually use that, honestly. Like, I mean, I guess she knows that there's a connection there between Vader and Luke that it seems like nobody else really knows about.
Right.
But is that really useful to the rebellion? I don't think so.
I think maybe the only piece of information I paused on was when she does hear Vader make an offer for Luke to join him.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, she doesn't hear anything about overthrowing the Emperor or anything like that, but we can end this destructive conflict. She hears that part. But she doesn't hear father and son, nothing along those lines. But she does hear Vader extending this offer to a rebel, and she uses the words a conspirator.
And she knows he's the one that destroyed the Death Star too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So she's been Vader's detail, so she's privy to a lot of information, of course, right?
Yeah. It almost seems like that information would be more useful to the Emperor than to the rebellion. So.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, again, that goes back to where I was going of like, who would she report this to? Like, she's going to report Darth Vader for treason? It just doesn't seem... Who's she going to tell? FS451? He's going to put her down on the spot. Like, don't talk about our fearless leader in that way. That doesn't make any sense. He's the biggest dude in the galaxy. So, but I think maybe the other part of this too, of like extending from does Vader sense her or not, was if he did, why did he just walk by and leave her? So after Luke presumably goes down the vein or down the shaft, which she doesn't really know what happened. She's only hearing certain things. She can't see everything. If she hears one set of footprints go by or footsteps go by and nothing happens, right? And I kind of guessed that this was Vader probably just lost in thought. And again, an extension of maybe the answers before, not really caring about anything else outside of his own, which is where his mind is completely focused on with Luke, the obsession, like you were saying.
Yeah, to me, I don't think he would have. I think she wasn't a concern of his if he even knew anybody was in the vicinity, and he's got other things on his plate right now. So I think, yeah, he just kept on walking.
Yeah, agreed. So once she's able to collect herself and make her way back up to the more main ways or main areas of Cloud City, she comes up behind Vader and his entourage and has an opportunity to take a sniper shot at the Dark Lord of the Sith himself. What'd you think about that sequence and her just brashness of thinking that this was her one opportunity to finally do something, as delusional as may have been that it would have done anything, but just finally wanting to take control of some moment in her life and make a decision that might matter?
Yeah, I mean, well, and I guess I kind of hinted at this earlier when we were sort of discussing this, but to me, what I took it as is the opportunity was there, and it's kind of like earlier when she actually left because of the carbonite thing. It took like something crazy had to happen, and a crazy thing is Darth Vader is right in front of you and you have a gun. So I think something crazy had to happen. She was overcome with like all of the emotions about all the disturbing things that she's witnessed that have been, a lot of them, ordered by him. And I think she just, for a moment, stopped caring about the consequences. And that one moment is what it took for her to actually do something. And deserting, I think, was a good idea. But trying to shoot Vader is not really a great idea because,
Right.
and she even recognizes this, it's not going to do anything. So, not really the wisest choice, but it is, to me, it did make sense with the decision that she made to desert. Like, it seemed like the thought process behind it was kind of a similar thought process.
Yeah, and you kind of have to give her a little bit of kudos, I think, of like having the courage of thinking that, because that's kind of what it takes to be maybe more of a guerrilla type of rebel, of someone has to have the stones to take a shot and do something that they think could be meaningful, because those opportunities just don't come up very often. How often would you be able to see Darth Vader with his back to you, seemingly unaware of your existence, and you've got a gun, right? And you have this opportunity to be able to do it. So give her a little credit, maybe, of like,
Yeah, she tried.
She pulled the trigger, to her credit. Again, he probably would have sensed that danger and, brought the lightsaber out and deflected that and probably ended her life pretty quickly. But it was an interesting moment. But it really, what it did though, is that shock of all of that, she eventually links up with Lobot and another, I guess, just a Cloud City security guard, I think, right? Where
Yeah, the guy with the like ring around his head that we see.
Lobot, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he had a name. Thank you.
Yeah, that's Lando's number one, yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, him and is just like another guard. Yeah, faceless guard.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I wasn't really clear. So what was interesting about it is they didn't just, like, she was like, hey, I'm a pilot, I can help. It was, they scrutinized her. And Lobot, I guess, they kept talking about, or Adam Christopher kept talking about how the lights kept lighting up on Lobot. He doesn't ever say anything, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so presumably he's doing a background check or something like that.
Thinking.
Yeah, getting some information on who this person is and whatever. And, she's just kind of offering to help. And they're probably making sure, I don't know what they're trying to make sure. They're short on people at this point. But I think the question I was left with, though, was then when they agreed to let her help, is she joining Cloud City's security type of stuff, or is she actually joining the rebellion?
I took it as she is helping people evacuate with the intention of continuing on this path of helping people avoid the Empire, which maybe that does lead to the rebellion.
Yeah.
But she's at least like, it's not an official joining of the rebellion, but it's at least putting her on that path of working against the Empire instead of for the Empire.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And that's maybe where I was leaning to, is that this may have been helping the administration of Cloud City and the evacuation and some of that, but the next direction for her once that's settled would probably be to, how do I link up with the rebels? Because she's already saying somewhat rebellious things as well. She calls them imps.
Yeah.
And which she was like, curious how that came so smoothly off of her tongue, basically, and how quickly she kind of adopted that way of talking about them. And it sounds like that's her next logical progression, I think, at least, right?
Yeah, it's not said word for word, but I do feel like we were getting hints that that's probably where she's going to look next, especially if she needs that purpose. Then, once this task is over, that's probably where the next purpose is going to be, is just like increasing the, I guess, effectiveness of her actions.
All right. So you kind of flirted with leading us where you were going with this. But so what do you think her next steps were if once they find safety here? Where do you think she fits next? And if it's with the rebellion, like what area of the rebellion do you think she actually, falls into? Or where would you like to see this character kind of be?
I mean, I think she should go to the rebellion and like tell them all of the information that she has as a stormtrooper, for starters. And then, I mean, she said she's a good pilot. So,
Right.
I mean, maybe a rebel pilot would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, and clearly she's been a soldier. And she does seem to have credible intel, like being Vader's entourage. Like she would have some amount of information. I think that maybe the challenging part is the rebellion's not very trustworthy of, well, anybody, even at this point.
Yeah.
So would they have taken anything that she said seriously, right? And, even if she shared the information about Vader and Luke, maybe that, I'm curious if that would have like, pricked up a few ears, and maybe that would have found its way back to Leia. But maybe that would have been like a whole year later or something like that, that some of that would have even made any sense to her, because she doesn't know the relation of the family anything quite yet either, right? So
Yeah. I mean, I do think Leia would have listened to her, but getting Leia in the room is probably pretty hard.
well, especially
So,
at this point, I mean, all the trauma that Leia's gone through too, right?
yeah. But I mean, I will say it does seem like after Rogue One, they started listening to people a little bit more, maybe.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, maybe not a whole lot, but I think some improvements probably happened after that drama. So maybe she was able, at this stage in the rebellion, maybe she was able to at least tell someone and then be like, I'll look into it. Maybe we won't
Right.
totally trust you right now, but maybe we'll at least look into what you're saying.
Yeah, I think where I would have liked to see this character go in general would be maybe one of less of the front lines and fighting back, but taking all the pain and the suffering and stuff that she saw and dealt out firsthand. And rather than taking a Luthen or a Clea type of aim, and we're well past all of that, of course, but maybe take it more towards a helping with evacuating people and providing, health transport, and more of a like a rescue type of efforts and things like that, like relief, right? Rather than a combatant standpoint, just to, I don't know, to offset some of maybe the bad that she's done with helping rather than more fighting.
Yeah, that's true. Especially if she has trauma from combat, then yeah, I think relief probably would be a better fit. And she's a good pilot. I mean, she's getting experience helping the people in Cloud City. So, I mean, why not continue on that path?
Exactly. All right, so that's basically the story. Any kind of closing thoughts about how much you enjoyed this one? I mean, Adam Christopher in particular, like just kind of closing thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I love Adam Christopher. I'm looking forward to Adam Christopher's next book. I mean, as you can tell, I'm very excited. It's not coming out until November, and I'm already thinking about it. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really cool interpretation of what could happen to a stormtrooper that decides to desert, and kind of fun that we had that iconic scene thrown in there. So, yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, to take an iconic scene and not insert someone into it, but remain on the peripheral and not feel like you're changing anything is always really important.
Yeah.
And Adam Christopher, I think, does a great job of this. And his writing is just so, it's not campy. It doesn't take itself terribly serious. There were a couple of lighthearted moments. I like one of my favorite moments, I think, in the book is actually you were talking about when she's, cramming her armor in the bathroom and stuff like that. And she disassembles the rifle, or she tries to hide the rifle, and she stuffs it in her tunic. And I thought for sure, like some authors would have, like, oh, if she crosses her arms, she can kind of mask that she's got the blaster. And Adam Christopher says crosses her arms and it looks like she's got her arms crossed over a blaster.
Yeah.
It looks like she's carrying an E11. So I like that he kind of has those tongue-in-cheek moments, poking a little bit of fun at ourselves too, of like while it's kind of a kid story in general, there's also practicalities that go into it, and it's not just matters of convenience, I think, as you tell these stories. But I'm with you. I mean, Master of Evil comes out, what, November 11th?
11th, yeah.
Right, of this year, 2025. So it's going to be a book that we're excited for you to cover and really can't wait for Adam Christopher to get another crack at Star Wars in the limelight with a full-fledged novel. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I'm just going to have to reread his other stuff to to hold me over until it comes out.
I know, right? I should reread Shadow of the Sith. I haven't read it in a while.
I know, and it was so good. So
It was,
I think it's time. Yeah, time for a reread.
All right. Well, we got to make that happen with all of the other books. I'm still trying to get True Trials of the Jedi. Just let me get through that one first.
Yeah.
All
well,
right,
at least High Republic has slowed down, so there will be some time now.
We do. And so
Yeah.
a huge thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. You want to give shout outs to folks out in the live stream?
Yeah, so thank you so much for those who joined us tonight. We had Music Train, Skywalker's Academy, and Alejandro.
Cool. Thanks. And Alex saying that Lauren is now a Lobot fan for life.
I mean, I liked him before. I just didn't realize that was his name.
Did you ever read the comic where it goes into Lando and Lobot's backstory?
No, that sounds cool though.
It's kind of right. Yeah. I'll send it to you and you can take a look at that one.
Okay, you have mixed feelings about it, or?
The whole story in general was a little bit weird because it's more about like Lando, like, and they don't trust him. This is right after Cloud City.
Mhm.
And then it kind of, I don't want to get into it now, but
Okay.
I'll send it to you and you tell me what
1
you
hour
think.
later. Okay.
Right. Yeah. We'll do a breakdown of this one. And maybe this is something we need to bring onto the show at some point. But yeah, so thanks to everyone who came out the live stream, ktdcast.com/YouTube. If you are listening to this, thanks for the download. We'd love for you to come out and join us. Albert and I'll be back on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central. Again, Andor character spotlights. We're going to be spotlighting Mon Mothma. So it's one you're not going to want to miss. And of course, Trials of the Jedi, both non-spoiler and spoiler-filled reviews by Lauren over on our Jedi Novel Archive playlist on the YouTube channel. And once again, Lauren, what else do you have coming up in the near future for JNA?
So we have Thrawn Alliances coming up in the future. I'm reading that one right now, so we will see the exact date on that. But we also have the Bad Batch novel Sanctuary pre-release sneak peek coming on July 22nd. And yeah, and then I just recently posted Trials of the Jedi, which is out there right now.
Yeah, and the full review for Sanctuary, I think, it releases on August 5th, right?
Correct. Yeah, so full review August 5th for that one.
Yeah, so all right around the corner. And then, Lauren, you've got another project that you do monthly called One Hell of a Fanfic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one and what Chel's latest episode was?
Yes, so One Hell of a Fanfic, myself and my co-host Steph, we talk about Star Wars fanfics, and every month we pick a new one. And we both just started reading fanfics when we started this podcast a couple years ago, so we're still somewhat fanfic newbies. And so we're going into fanfic as lifetime Star Wars fans, kind of just like exploring what fanfic is all about and talking about it together. So it's been really fun. And yeah, our latest episode was Magic Blankets, which was a fanfic in which young Anakin learns how to crochet and ends up saving the galaxy as a result. It was adorable.
The stories that y'all cover are so, like, they just run the gamut. They're just so much fun, though. And
There is a huge range of fanfic.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's curious, even something like Anakin crocheting for a lot of people might sound silly to an extent, but the way that some authors are able to like create these environments and kind of new aspects of the characters and bring them, and y'all do such a great job of whether it's canon adjacent or like if it's completely different or if it fits within canon, to be able to kind of see like how would this even have fit, or is it just an interesting, fun, curious idea that we don't get enough of, I think, in my opinion, to where it's just something fun and different to explore. We don't have to take it too seriously in some ways, but some of these authors really do an amazing job too.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of them are like very good, and you get some silly ones and some sweet ones like the Anakin crochet, and you also get some really dark ones like Leia killing Tarkin, for example. I mean, you get like some crazy stuff, which in the moment you'll be like, this sounds crazy, but then once I read it, I'll be like, okay, they sold me on that idea.
Nice. All right. So yeah, go check that out. I meant to show the link up on the screen. Darn it. I even made one for y'all. So there you go. youtube.com/@onehellofafanfic. Just search it in the YouTubes. You'll find it and go support them on that as well. All right, Lauren, any final comments before we call it a night?
I think we covered everything.
I think so as well. So again, thanks everyone for coming out. We hope you enjoyed this, and we hope to catch you on Wednesday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.